Today's project on the Nissan Murano is going to be replacing the alternator. I know that years ago there was an alternator recall in some of these years, so some of your alternators already may have been replaced on a recall. That was the case with mine previously, and then about 13 months, maybe 14 months ago, I replaced my own alternator with a lifetime guarantee unit, but unfortunately it was refurbed. When they refurbished it, they only replaced the parts that were actually faulty at the time of the refurb. So now I have to tear the alternator again. So this time I'll do a video of it for you. So the alternator is buried all the way over here on this end. So that means that all this has to come off. The radiator's coming out, the radiator fans are coming out, and I found that the easiest way to make all of that happen is to start with getting your battery taken out. So basically the battery's pretty simple. You got your two bolts here for your tie downs. On this car it's a 10mm. Then you can remove your two battery terminals. Mine are a little different than most. I've upgraded them. So whatever it takes to get your battery terminals off, get these two out, and then you can remove the battery. Then we'll move on to the battery tray underneath. Your battery may or may not have a plastic tray underneath it. The one I have does, and that just makes the height high enough for an upgraded or updated battery. This tray can sometimes make the height high enough for a newer battery. The newer battery may be shallower but still have the correct cranking inch because it's a little bit newer. So don't forget to take this out and then reinstall it, because if you don't do this, then the battery tie downs won't be the right height anymore. Factory battery drip tray. Okay, so now, in order to get this out, there's actually 5 bolts down here. There's one here, 2, 3, so there's kind of like a triangle here. And then this one, there's one up here a little further, and there's one tucked down here in this corner also. So, to help you see what you're looking at here, this is actually the negative terminal that I removed, and the positive terminal I have tucked over here. Okay? It's a little tough to see because of the lighting. I've got the sunlight coming in at the same time, so I'm doing my best to light this up for you guys. But this is the battery tray area. You got 5 bolts that have to come out. They're all 12mm heads, and I'll work on that now. So you still want to be careful with that positive terminal. You still don't want that to touch ground. Different circuits and computers are going to have some stored voltage. Whether or not it actually gave you a problem by shorting it out isn't really something you want to risk, so just watch out for it. Any type of screwdriver will do. Just push the clip in to release it. Start sliding it up. Get the gum free. And just tuck that up over maybe the transmission dipstick. And the last thing you have to do here is there is a plastic clip here that holds this harness to the battery tray. You can release that just by squeezing the back of it with a pair of small pliers. And there is your battery tray. These clips are pretty simple. They're a 2-piece clip. They have the pin that goes down into the expanding plastic section down below. I'll show you a close look at those here in just a second. Sometimes they break like that one did. And that's not even an original clip. It's not even that old. This clip is probably less than a year old. So that one I'll just have to cut out because it's breaking apart on me. And then I'll just put a new clip in. With those 3 removed, you can actually pull this tube right out of the way. And that frees up a lot of space. The next thing I'm going to tackle here is there's harnesses that attach to these fans. Mine are a little different, but essentially there's a plug that goes to each fan, and that harness goes towards the passenger side of the vehicle. So you can actually unplug both fans and fold the harness backwards over out of the way. So that's what we'll work on now. You'll see me cutting a couple of zip ties for stuff that I've added myself, so just take a look at yours, remove whatever you have to remove as far as wires, for those two fans and get those out. So this is a good time to go ahead and take this this small tube off the radiator, where the radiator cap is. Just fold that over the side out of your way. So I've got the harness loose. Now I just have to unplug the fan plugs. It's a pretty basic plug. Just press on the release tab, pull the plug out. That's your fan harness. Okay, so that can go right out of your way. Two bolts, two 10mm bolts out of the top of this fan assembly. There's one on the driver's side, and there's one a little bit to the passenger side of the middle. Okay, it's right here. Second 10mm bolt right there. So now we can put a drain pan underneath the vehicle, because I'm going to take the upper radiator hose off next, because the radiator is coming out as part of this project. As you know, we can't even really see the alternator. It is all the way down here. If I reach down, I can touch it, but you can't access it when it's coming off. I'm going to remove the whole hose, just so it's not flapping in my way. Give that a chance to drain down a little bit. Okay, now that's an extra wire that I installed for HID headlights, so that's going to be out of the way there. Now at the bottom, underneath this fan, there's one rubber line that goes this way that is actually clipped into the bottom of that hose. Plugs, or sort of clips into the bottom of this shroud. So this is the back of your fan shroud, which you'd never be able to see unless it's off. Okay, and right down here is that plastic U-clip. Okay, that's where that hose gets plugged in underneath. So that's what you're reaching all the way down there for. I'll give you an idea what that looks like. It has a plastic clip that looks kind of like this. It's not even really a clip, just like a holder, and the hose sits in it like this. So you got to reach down and pull that hose out and let it sit down there. It can stay connected to whatever else it's connected to, but just pull that hose out, otherwise you won't be able to lift this whole fan shroud in. Now I should be able to pull these fans and shroud right out. Be careful over here, because the clearance is kind of tight on this nipple on the radiator cap, and be careful here where we just took this hose off, because that's also a little bit close. You can get it out, but if you're too hasty, you're liable to break one of those things. Okay, next thing I'm probably going to do here is work on removing the serpentine belt on that side. I have a video about that already. I'm not going to go over the serpentine belt here in this video. Sweet. Going over my garage. Great. So now, with that out of the way, with the radiator out of the way, the next thing I did is I disconnected the high current wire from the alternator, because that's in your way for the next step. So the easiest way I found to access this upper bolt on the alternator was with a 12mm wrench, and you can reach in from this way, get a wrench on it. Okay, it's a little tricky to see it, but you can get a wrench on it, Now you can't do this with the radiator in place, so this is one of the reasons it's critical for the radiator to come out. Okay, so here's a look in the wheel well. Okay, I've already loosened the tension on the AC alternator belt. You can see I've already removed the belt, there's no belt there. Okay, and then in order to access the lower bolt for the alternator, remove the pulley from that tensioner. Okay, that pulley's normally right about behind here. Alright, so now if we look up here, okay, so that on the left there, that's the stud that the tensioner pulley normally goes on, and then that hole just to the right, that's the mounting point for the alternator. Okay, so what happens is there's a long bolt that comes from the other side underneath the exhaust manifold. Okay, so that bolt comes this way through, and then you put a nut on this end. So you can release that nut. That is a 14 millimeter head on that. Once you release that nut, you can then just push that bolt straight out the other side. Let me show you what type of bolt that is, because it's a special. Okay, so this gives you an idea what we're looking at. All right, so this is the upper bolt I showed you before. With a 12 millimeter wrench, you can get that loose. Okay, then this is the lower bolt. All right, so what I was just showing you with that hole, this is the nut that you would see. Okay, so this would be, if you're in the wheel well, it's in this orientation. Okay, with this nut looking out at you. Okay, so once you loosen that nut and remove it, then you can just slide this out. It's more like a pin than a bolt, really. And you see this tab here? So once that gets tightened, this won't even turn anymore. Right? And then once you try and loosen it, it'll turn a little and then catch, because it has this nice little tab on it. It'll hold itself in place. It's kind of a tight fit to reach your hand around behind to slide that out underneath the exhaust manifold, but it's doable. It's not that bad. The hardest part is getting this loose because it's kind of tight quarters. And what I have to do now is I have to replace this bolt and this nut both, because I've had them off a few times and I actually unfortunately damaged them this time taking them out. But that gives you an idea of the two different mounting points on that alternator. Okay, so here's a look at the new alternator in place. I had to replace that top bolt. I think I was showing you that I ruined the head on the old one. It's been out so many times for different things. Now, I'm going to try and see if we can get a look down here. Okay, so there's the back of that bolt as I was showing you before. And that goes all the way through the bracket to the other side. This was challenging to get in place because it's heavy and there's not really that much clearance. So let me show you the other side where I put the nut back on. So there's the other end of that bolt. I was able to get the nut started. I haven't tightened it yet. So what I found to work for me is I laid under the car with my head basically right under the oil pan, and then with my right hand I reached up around through this opening in order to steady the alternator and try and get it lined up, and then with my left hand I reached around the other side to slide that bolt in this way towards this side. It was tricky. I would say leave yourself some time for that, because that was definitely challenging. Probably the most challenging part of putting it back together is getting that bolt back in. But this one slid in pretty easy once I got it lined up. And then I was able to pivot on this bolt in order to install that upper bolt that I just showed you a moment ago. So reinstallation, I would start with this lower bolt first.